I was recently contacted by one of my viewers that watches my channel regularly about a pretty disturbing story that I want to share with you guys here on the channel, because I've seen this becoming more and more of a trend pretty much all of a sudden. You know, you see different videos across YouTube of different migrants basically taking over entire towns. It was even mentioned in one of the presidential debates. Different YouTube videos have confirmed that this is in fact actually happening. And one of my viewers reached out to me about a small town that this is actually happening to. The town there is called Twin Falls, Idaho. And this person inherited about 20 different rental properties from an uncle who recently passed away. Kind of unexpectedly inherited these properties. Actually, her mother and her aunt inherited them, and she's helping trying to figure out the logistics of keeping these properties, which ones to sell and whatnot. So many of these properties are kind of like lower end properties that, you know, are definitely not luxury, let's put it like that. Probably like Class C, Class D properties. It turns out that she found out her uncle was participating in some sort of refugee program where all of his properties, or most of them anyhow, are rented out to immigrants that just got to the United States, which we have no idea really how they got here. And they're getting all kinds of things for free, including the housing. So what she told me is the rent is being paid by the government, and we're trying to figure out right now if it's the local government in Idaho that's paying for the rent, or if it's actually the federal government that's paying this. And I'll be able to give you an update on this once I have more information. But the rent is completely paid for. All of the utilities are also completely paid for. The water, the sewer, the trash, electricity, you name it, all being paid for. And on top of that, these people are basically being schooled on how to become house cleaners and how to do different trades. They're being sort of groomed to integrate into society and get a job. And come to find out, it's not just her uncle's properties that are being rented to a lot of these refugees or migrants in the area. Also, many other properties nearby are being rented out in the same fashion. And you know, here's something crazy, guys. When I was working in real estate full time, I saw many different people look into buying properties that would be rented out to low-income housing people, basically Section 8 tenants, right? But I never once saw in any of those instances where Section 8 tenants would be replaced by illegal immigrants. Now, I don't know for a fact that all the people who are living there are illegal. For all I know, they could be here legally in some fashion. So this woman who had inherited these properties, she actually went out to Idaho and visited all 20 of these properties that she inherited. And when she got there, she was shocked to find the condition of some of these properties. Like, first of all, they're not in the greatest locations. They're not the greatest properties to begin with, right? But on top of that, you go there, the places have no landscaping, you know, just kind of trash all over the place, the typical bad neighborhood look. And in one of the houses, there was a bunch of African immigrants in there. Looked like they were straight off the boat from Africa, you know, like the typical African clothing with the headdress and the actual dresses. Like, they didn't look American, essentially. Or did they really look like they were trying to integrate into society, she told me. And besides these people getting everything for free and being taught how to integrate into society, apparently they're also taking a lot of the jobs in the area that would normally go to American citizens. I'm not going to name the companies that she told me here because this is just allegedly. I don't actually know for sure that these people are working at these companies, so I'm not going to name them by name. But they are big manufacturers of things like cheese, yogurt, protein powders, protein bars, things like that. And these companies are supposedly paying these people at least $15 an hour, if not more. And at the same time, they're getting everything for free, guys, which is an opportunity that Americans in this country don't even have. If you work a full-time job and you're making a $15 an hour wage, you're not going to be getting anything for free. Maybe you'll be eligible for food stamps if your family qualifies at best, but you're not going to be eligible for low-income housing. You're not going to be eligible to get all of your utility bills paid on the house. You're not going to be eligible to get your rent completely paid. You're not going to be eligible for any of that stuff as a citizen. So she was told by the property manager who's managing all of her uncle's former properties that Apparently these people have about 8 months to stay on these programs, and then they're supposed to have their status changed, possibly to US citizen. Maybe they get a green card, not really sure what the next step is for them from there. And they move out, the next round of people comes in. Where do they come from? How did they get there? Who's paying for all of this is a complete unknown. And I hope that I can bring you more information on this in the future. But this is a verified story that I verified myself that is in fact happening right here in the United States in many different small towns across the country, guys. This is just one of the latest examples of it. And apparently the situation is getting so bad for the locals that they're just leaving the area altogether in search of better opportunities elsewhere because they are claiming they can't get these jobs and they're all going to these migrants. The reason I want to bring this story up is to not promote fear or rage or hate against immigrants, because obviously we do need a certain level of legal immigration in this country, especially if we're going to bring in qualified, smart people to do important jobs. That is something that we'll always benefit from here in this country. However, it's an entirely different story when we're talking about an unknown amount of people pouring through our borders, getting here in various different ways, and ending up in programs like this where they get more benefits than any American ever could. And it's basically the golden ticket and the fast track to the front of the line in American society. And this is something that everybody needs to be aware of, because if you see things like this happening where you live, you need to try to do your own digging and figure out, how is this happening, guys? Because I don't know how it's happening. I'm just bringing this story to everyone's attention. With all the people that watch this channel, someone out there is going to know somebody who knows something about how this is actually happening, the inner workings of who's providing these services, right? Who is setting up these programs where these people can get all these services completely for free on taxpayer dollars. Somebody out there has to know this stuff. And the sooner that we can all kind of work together on this and figure out how this is actually happening, the faster we may be able to end up shutting it down. So the more attention that's brought to the issue, then the better and faster I think we'll all be able to resolve it together. And you know, the saddest part isn't even just that these people that are not even really supposed to be here are getting all these free services on taxpayer dollars, but it's also the fact that these people are getting these opportunities. Meanwhile, the average American is kind of stuck looking for work right now. This is not just happening in Twin Falls, Idaho. It's happening places all across the country. In fact, one of the biggest risks right now that's going to throw us into the official recession is going to be the job market and unemployment, guys. Interestingly enough, even though we had this big labor shortage during the pandemic, we no longer do. Maybe it's because of things like this. Maybe it's because people are coming in here and getting these jobs instead of Americans. And meanwhile, you see a ton of people getting laid off right now. We just saw a ton of layoffs announced over this past week. Boeing was by far the biggest one, with 17,000 people losing jobs. I reported to you guys that 7-Eleven is closing down over 400 stores in North America within the next few months. Who knows how many jobs are going to be lost from that? You have companies like Fruit of the Loom performing layoffs right now, and there's a lot of smaller layoffs going on with big companies like Amazon and DHL. They'll lay off a few hundred people here and there, and no one even bats an eye. Also, if you're somebody out there who's in a managerial position that is actively hiring these people, let us know why. Let us know if it's because you can't find Americans who want to work these jobs. Let us know if it's because you're able to get away with paying these people less money than you would an American worker. What is it? Because I'm sure everybody's dying to know the answer to these questions. But what makes me the most suspicious about this is the fact that corporations in general are getting rewarded for bad behavior, guys. Like, for example, Walgreens just announced that they're going to be closing over 1,200 stores over the next 3 years in order to improve earnings. And you know what happened? Walgreens stock shot up so much that they had their best day in the last 16 years. So a company like Walgreens is literally rewarded by Wall Street and investors for saying we're going to close down 1,200 stores. How many people work at those 1,200 stores? Maybe 10, 20? Maybe you're talking over 20,000 people who are going to be potentially losing jobs because of this announcement from Walgreens. For anybody wondering, I'm walking around Tiburon Yacht Club today. Walgreens said that they have about 8,000 stores and only 6,000 of them are profitable, guys. So literally 25% of their stores are not turning a profit right now, and they only announced they're closing 1,200. What about the other 800 that aren't profitable? They could be soon following, because one thing we've seen happen with a lot of companies recently is they go through different rounds of layoffs. You know, they lay off a group of people, see how it goes, check their balance sheets, see where their profits and losses are, and then adjust from there. And then they find out, wait a minute, we're actually still losing money, or we could be doing better. Let's lay off more people, or let's close down more stores. Every single business right now, especially these big corporations, is doing everything they can to run leaner than before. And what that means is people losing jobs. And I don't know how these CEOs come up with all of these crazy sayings and crazy announcements and excuses for all this, because they sound like they're just best buddies with the Fed and they all get their language coaching from the same place, guys. Because Walgreens said, this will realign our footprint to a healthier store base that we believe will enable us to respond more dynamically to shifts in consumer behavior and buying preferences. I interpret this as we're willing to close down as many stores as we need to and fire as many people as we need to in order to make sure our share prices are healthy and our business is turning a profit. That's how I interpret it. And of course, they're far from alone. True Value Hardware, they just announced Chapter 11 bankruptcy just a couple days ago. They've been in business over 70 years in this country, and of course, it's taking this current recession to finally wipe them out. And apparently, they are being acquired by a company called Do It Best. So you might not necessarily see all these True Value stores close down, but they may close down temporarily and be rebranded with a Do It Best brand, which I've never even seen this store. They also say that any of the independently owned True Value stores are not going to be affected from this bankruptcy, and they'll probably continue to remain in business. So if you know that there's a True Value in your neighborhood and it's independently owned, then most likely you're not going to see a change there. So at least with this one, it's good that people aren't losing jobs, unless Do It Best decides to just fire everybody and close the stores down. But it's extremely frustrating as an American to see literally American citizens not get first dibs on job opportunities. At the same time, so many companies are downsizing and cutting the fat right now in order to boost their profits and earnings and share prices. And everybody who works for these companies ends up being collateral damage. But yet somehow we can bring in people that barely can probably even speak any English from other countries that are not citizens and give them all the benefits in the world to try to integrate and live and work here. What is the reason for that, guys? I've heard different theories about this, and I'm not going to get into all of them here or anything like that. But the reality is, they're all just theories. Nobody really knows why this is actually happening. One thing we haven't talked about in a little bit on the channel is the Sahm rule. The Sahm rule was invented by Claudia Sahm, who used to work at the Fed, an economist. And basically all it is it's a measure on US unemployment that can indicate if we're in a recession. It's when the unemployment rate goes up by more than a half a percentage point in a 12-month period. And when that happens, almost every single time in American history, that means that we're in a recession. And this happened back in July and has been flashing red ever since. But now Claudia is coming out and saying, well, maybe this time it's different. And I don't know if she's being pressured by people at the Fed or people that know her that say, hey, you need to stay quiet on this or whatever until the election, or try to make things look better than they really are. But even somebody who invented this basically foolproof method to determine in a simple way whether or not the US economy is in a recession is now going back and saying that, well, maybe we're not. She said it has not been perfect historically, and if when you go back to the 50s and 60s, there were times when it turned on and turned off. So I guess there were a few other instances in the past where it didn't 100% predict that we are in a recession. So one thing that she said recently is, there's no guarantees with this. It was really meant to be just a rule of thumb, and this time really could be different. Well, that's up for you guys to decide if this time it really is different. And I'm not saying it's impossible, guys. I'm a very open-minded person, and I believe anything is possible. Maybe this time it really is different, because we all know that things got completely turned upside down over the past 4 years. And maybe all of the traditional economic indicators that we look at are no longer predictable or reliable in terms of figuring out the health of the economy. I would also say that one of the main reasons for that is because all of the data that we get to look at is completely bogus. You know, the SOM rule tracks unemployment data, but unemployment data is inaccurate. So how can the SOM rule accurately predict a recession if the data we're getting and punching into the model isn't accurate to begin with? That's what I have to say about it. So as I'm sitting here editing this video, I kind of realized I forgot to say a couple of things that I probably had in my mind when I was shooting this, and I want to add it in here. And one of them is that the government understates unemployment, right? We're getting these unemployment numbers that we know are totally bogus. There's a lot more people who are unemployed. And think about it. The SOM rule is already flashing red with the bogus numbers. They try to make it look as good as possible. It still doesn't look good. It still looks bad. And the actual unemployment numbers are actually a lot higher than that. So even with understated unemployment numbers, the SOM rule is still flashing red. So people need to understand that the economy is probably actually a lot worse than what these economic indicators are actually leading us on to believe. These things that are flashing red are flashing red based on the feel-good government data, you know, the things that make them look as good as possible, but we don't track unemployment like we did 30 years ago. You know, we don't track the jobs numbers like we did 30 years ago. And if we did, this would actually look a whole lot worse than it even does right now. The shocking part to me is that Claudia is kind of just like going back on her own rule, right? She's just kind of ignoring this all of a sudden and saying, well, there's no recession right now, and given what we know, we're not really hanging on the edge of one either. But the shocking part about this whole story to me, guys, is it's always the same thing, right? It's, oh, look over here. Don't pay any attention to this thing that we've paid attention to for decades now that has been historically accurate almost every single time. That doesn't mean anything no more. Now, just listen to what we say, because none of those things actually matter. We're going to tell you how low unemployment is and how good the jobs numbers are and how much the wages are rising over inflation, and that's supposed to beautifully make everybody feel better overnight, just because the government says that that's what's actually happening. Never mind what people are seeing in real life, never mind the SOM rule, never mind all the people that are getting laid off right now. None of that actually matters. And I think a lot of people just aren't buying this, guys, including me, because this isn't the first time they've done this. In fact, almost every single recession we've had before, most notably back in 2008 when we had the great financial crisis, you can just go back and look up stories, guys. Do it for yourself whenever you feel like in the free time. Go up and look at stories beginning of 2008 talking about how the economy is in solid condition, the labor market's in solid condition, and the housing market's in great condition. Everything is fine. There's nothing to worry about, which is exactly what we're being told right now. And then bang, everything collapsed. So in my opinion, whatever the officials and whatever the experts at the government say means practically nothing. We all need to do our best to use our own vigilance, our own personal experiences, and what we see happening with our friends, our family, our neighbors to make a judgment call on what's really going on. The problem with that is then people look at their own little bubble and say, well, things are really bad here, it must be like that everywhere, or things are really good where I live, it must be like that everywhere, which is not true. As much as I've tried to drill that into people's heads here on the channel, I don't think it's ever really going to work, unfortunately. Here's the other thing I forgot to say. People see me here in California like, oh, Michael, you're just staying in rich areas. Well, obviously I live in Miami. It's also a rich area, Miami Beach. So it's kind of like the same thing. Whether I'm at home or I'm over here in California, it's all kind of the same thing. But realize I have driven across the country twice now, all the way from Florida to California and back, and in between different places in the Midwest. And I've driven many places on the East Coast with other road trips in the past, guys. So I have visited many different states and cities across the country, and I have seen how places operate. I've seen the local economies everywhere. It's not like somebody like me is completely out of touch with reality of what things are like in different areas. It's just that I spend my time in areas like this, but I have been to other areas and seen how economically depressed certain things are. You guys who follow me regularly saw when I was in Illinois, I took you around to different areas there and showed you how bad things looked. Most notably the mall there that is like completely dead. That's just like one example off the top of my head. but you can't go by just what things are like in one area. You have to look at what things are like all over the place. And if you haven't traveled the country and seen it for yourself, then you really don't know. All I know is there's a lot of shady things happening in our country right now, more than ever, when it comes to this immigrant and migrant crisis that's going on right now. Millions upon millions of people have poured through our borders illegally, have been taking American jobs, leaving American families desperately looking for the next opportunity while these people get everything for free, and we're supposed to just shut up and believe everything is okay. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.